Simon. Show! Won't lie, this was initially another episode I had zero interest going into, as I have never heard anybody highlight it compared to the other big names. But after watching it, I was shocked at how outstanding it is. Uncle Simon is a surprisingly underrated episode detailing the ugly nature of a constant cycle of hatred, but in that classic Twilight Zone fun. We follow a lady named Barbara who's tending to her elderly, dying old Scrooge of an uncle, the titular Uncle Simon. Barbara's a greedy, cynical bird basically tending to the old man since she seeks to inherit his vast fortune when he eventually keels over, and be rich without having to actually work for her own moolah.
What a bitch.
However, Uncle Simon is also the world's most obnoxious grouch himself, and constantly pesters, mocks, annoys, and belittles Barbara every chance he gets. He's a retired scientist, you see, and he's very aware of Barbara's true intentions for remaining by his side. He basically acts like an ultra douche to her just to force her to quit and go away, not getting her filthy hands on a cent of his money. Simon's totally over the top, but he's at least a very funny dick. He enjoys mocking his niece so much that he seriously goes out of his way to tease her with new creative insults every day.
You'd like to know, wouldn't you? That's the only character trait you share with normal women. Curiosity.
Who came here and nursed you and kept you alive?
You did! You did, you scrounging female ape.
Yep, both our protagonists are very cartoony, unlikable jerks, stuck in a dysfunctional relationship, ultimately fueled by their own pettiness. Now, some folks don't like this episode at all, precisely because they find it hard to get invested in a tale where both characters are unlikable and hard to root for, but I think the show makes it work. This is clearly a comeuppance story, as Uncle Simon and Barbara both have legit motives backing them up. Barbara is very shallow about how she's only nursing her elder and using him for an easy payday, but she does put up with a lot of verbal abuse as the old coot nags her incessantly and demeans her every night. However, Uncle Simon also makes valid points calling her out on her own terrible character too, since he's right. She is only sticking around until he dies to claim his money, and all his jackassery is an attempt to force her out so she can get her own life. Yet he is a total jerk, and it's obvious he gets some jollies out of being a prick towards her too. As Rod Serling points out, they're trapped in a cycle of their hatred, where one of them can easily change, but the two are both just so petty that neither of them does. It can get irritating watching the duo bicker for a while, but I love where the episode goes later. The mansion is a recycled set from episodes like The Masks and Lateness of the Hour, but it adds this subtle isolation to the episode as two jerks are stuck with each other in what's ironically a gorgeous place to live. You can see why Barbara desires this place and why Uncle Simon refuses to just hand it over, yet it feels claustrophobic as the two grow worse. Barbara has been babysitting her jerk uncle for a while, but she's nearing the end of her rope. Uncle Simon is also getting tired of the vulture waiting to swoop in when he falls, so he forms a wicked plan. One day, Barbara and Uncle Simon finally come to blows when she listens in outside of his laboratory, where after a savage diss track, Simon suffers a heart attack and tumbles to his death. It seems Barbara's victorious as she breaks into a Disney song cheering about his death. But this being the Twilight Zone, there's a catch. Simon's lawyer arrives to read her the late uncle's will, revealing that she can keep the mansion and his money if she tends to and watches over Simon's invention, his robot son.
I'm a mechanical man, built by your late Uncle Simon Pope.
And the second half of this episode is Barbara putting up with Robbie the robot before the machine slowly reveals its true function. The only major problem I have with this episode is the robot. Now, I do like what they do with it later, but my issue is the robot is not scary. The Robbie the robot model just doesn't strike you as intimidating, especially in a modern lens. This might have been creepy back then, but nowadays it looks super cartoonish and doesn't feel as threatening as it should be. And yes, this is a big issue because the episode tries to make it scary. They hold long shots on it a lot, has Robbie hide in the shadows, and tries to make it scheme behind Barb's back, but it's just too silly.
A new craving. Hot chocolate. I would love a cup of hot chocolate.
Though, that being said, the writing greatly atones for it. Barbara's not allowed to leave the house as long as the robot is active, or else she won't get Simon's dough. So she's pretty much stuck being with this thing, needing her attention 24/7, just as much as her late uncle. If she leaves the house or refuses the robot's care, then the money goes to Simon's former science institution instead. However, things get creepy really fast. While the robot's not physically imposing, it definitely feels psychologically horrifying as the mecha grows beyond average programming. The robot soon forms a personality, carries on some of Simon's experiments, and soon treats Barbara with disrespect, acting almost like her late uncle.
Would you please close all the windows and pull the drapes? I don't like the light. I don't like the draft.
What is the matter? Barbara, tell me, please, what is the matter?
Ugh, that voice change is legit unnerving. We soon get the big twist. The robot was programmed to behave exactly like Uncle Simon, and Barbara instantly realizes that the robot was designed to mimic her entire life of serving her uncle. That's right, the machine's purpose is to carry on Barbara's miserable life long after Simon died, and the only way she can keep his fortune is if she remains in the same tormented pain she suffered for most of her days for all eternity, as the robot will never die. Barbara is doomed to forever live serving and suffering from a mecha Uncle Simon for the rest of her life, or give up on the money. This was Simon's plan all along, as one last screw you towards his toxic family.
You magnificent bastard, I read your book!
The will has a specific clause where Simon's lawyers or other authority figures visit the mansion once every week to ensure the safety of the robot and that Barbara's still there tending to it, basically solidifying that the gold digger has no way out of this mess. She has to deal with Bender 2.0 or get nada.
Now that is irony!
This episode is great. I love that old school cruel irony the show is best known for. This episode is a tad slow at the start, as it's mainly the duo fighting each other, but it gets more unsettling once the robot pops up. In fact, the episode has this very subtle horror that the droid is not just programmed to act like Uncle Simon, he might actually be Uncle Simon. Throughout the episode, we're told that Simon was a brilliant scientist, and he has a top secret lab, which even his niece was banned from, so it's strongly suggested he's been planning this for a long while. Over the course of the plot, the robot slowly begins mimicking Simon, requiring his favorite hot chocolate drink, copying his daily routines, and most unsettling, his voice changes from Hawking-esque to Simon's. The episode episode never spells it out, but fans believe that Uncle Simon programmed a part of himself into the robot as a new body to keep himself alive and prolong Barbara's suffering in a more efficient body. Yeah, bet you didn't know Uncle Simon was secretly Dr. Zola the entire time.
I am not a recording, Fräulein.
This is one of Serling's ambiguous endings done right, as there is enough evidence to lean towards either theory this time. Is the douchey uncle really still in there, or is it simply just a robot designed to be like him?
The world may never know.
I'm unsure which theory I stand by, but I do enjoy both twists, as Simon's reign of terror will never end, unless Barbara finally lets go. Alas, the power of greed is too strong, so the episode ends with Barb serving the robot exactly like she did for her uncle. Broken, bitter, and giving in to her fate. In Serling's words, she made this mess, and now she has to sleep in it. I totally love this episode, and praise it as one of the more classic staples of the series, as it does have great scares, insane ideas, complex characters, and a real lesson on how only you can end a cycle of hate yourself, because if you don't, you risk being stuck in it for the rest of your short life. It's quite shocking how deep that is, not only for a retro TV show, but coming from a story featuring a wacky robot of all things. I highly recommend this tale, as it truly shines as a phenomenal Twilight Zone plot in the less than stellar final season of the show. So, unlike Uncle Simon, I can find it in my cold void of a heart to grant this epic a gold skull. While the mecha is far from best monster winner, this is a wonderful cautionary tale, which still maintains its place as a model of greatness.
I'll fix it for you now.
You'll fix it for me now. What?
I'll fix it for you now, Uncle.
The Twilight Zone.